Hello, everyone. Welcome to another office hour with Dr. Claire Moon. It's me from Aligning Light Astrology, and we're going to be going over several questions today. We're going to be talking about lunar revolutions. We're going to be talking about how to use AstroGold and get my complicated wheel. I do have a medical side note at some point, which will be just for fun, because I'm going to use astrology. And I feel like there's several other things. Let me just make sure. Those are most of them. And the lunar nodes. I'm going to talk about natal interpretation of the lunar nodes. So those are going to be some of the things for today. And then, of course, if anyone does show up live, I have a chat on the right-hand side of my screen. That's where you can ask your questions if you have any that you want to ask me live. Um, let's see. I don't think I have any announcements. Thank you, everyone, for letting me drop in late on this. I had quite the day, which I will tell you more about later. But I think first things first. Oh, hello, Reverend Kai. Nice to see you. Um, let's let's do a little Astro Gold tutorial. I'm not an affiliate of their company or anything, or, they're not a friend of the show, but I got a really good question about how to do what I call the complicated wheel, which is this wheel that has not only the signs on the outside, but then I have the um, Chaldean descending order decans and the Egyptian bounds. And so I want to show people how to do that real quick. And I actually discovered some cool things as well. So this was really great. So thanks for whoever asked this. So there's two ways to get here. Now, if you have a Mac, which if you're using AstroGold, you probably have a Mac. Most people who have a PC are using SolarFire usually, but I believe it's like Fender and Gibson. I think they're made at the same company. I don't know. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong. But if you do like the double click to get that little side menu up, I think on a PC it's like right clicking. You can get this auxiliary menu up, and then you can go to wheel style. And then there's a drop down menu that gives all of these wheel options that are pre-made. But then at the very bottom, there's an option for wheel editor. Now, the second way to get there would be going up to preferences, up to the preferences wheel, where you can change your home, do your different calculations. And here as well, you can go into wheels, the wheels tab. Oops, sorry. And I actually don't know if that drop-down menu showed. I think I might have to show my whole screen. Um, Whatever. The description is there. If you double click or right click, there should be an auxiliary menu. Pick the wheel option. At the bottom of that, there's the wheel editor. Or you can do preferences, wheels tab, wheel style, that little square, and that'll bring you to the wheel editor. Now let me see. Here's the wheel editor. So hopefully everyone can see that now. So once we get in here, this is where the fun begins. And I mean, you can pick to do like, I don't understand how to work with like making different bi wheels or tri wheels. I don't need to do that. But right now, you can select any of these things on the side, and there's all of these options, which I didn't really understand until I was looking at this and making sure I understood how to explain it. There's so many options in here. Like you can change the width of your lines in the chart. You can change the width of the cusp lines, the aspect lines, the whole thing. But what I want to do is I want to go to actions, which is the second drop-down menu in the wheel editor box. And then you go to add ring. And then from add ring, this is where I get the cool stuff. So I'm going to pick Egyptian terms or bounds because I like the Egyptian ones. And then it adds that. Now, what I discovered, which is super awesome, which I didn't know. So I was very thankful someone asked this question. So you can choose the terms wheel or any wheel, and you can rotate the glyphs. So I'm going to do it a couple times so you can see the difference. But in one orientation, all of the glyphs are oriented toward a center point, We can change it though, so that no matter where I am on the circle, the glyphs are upright. So I'm actually going to keep it like that. I think I switched mine to be this way. It makes my eyes hurt less. I'm not like trying to like tilt my head. Um, Now let's see. Actions. Let's add another ring. How about Decan rulers? Let's do the same thing. Rotate them glyphs. So that's how I make my wheel. And then at this point, we want to save. So once you have your wheel set up how you like it, you save wheel as, savey save, and then it should be in those drop down menus. So let's see, I didn't get this far. All right, so let's see if I go back, if it's there. And it is. There we go. My new and improved complicated wheel. So that is how you do that. So hopefully that helps. I know that's really specific and not everyone has AstroGold out there, but for those that do, hopefully that helps. I am going to remove it though, because it hurts my eyes. Okay. I mean, I love it, but it hurts my eyes. Yeah, I thought that was really handy, the rotating of the glyphs. Jason, you didn't miss much, just how to make my complicated wheel with the zodiacal subdivisions. That's how you do that. Thank you. Yeah, and I might play around. You can like make them different colors and like have like the glyphs be a rainbow instead of the stuff around it. So I'm gonna get a little bit Libra on things, I think. Okay, so now I'm going to, now that we're in a little bit, I'm gonna do an example and show you why I was a little late today. So, well, one, I had a bit of a scheduling mishap on my part that is a vestige of the last Mercury retrograde cycle. So, I overscheduled myself, so I'm here late. That's why that happened. But I dang near had to call in sick to my evening. I had to call in sick today, and I had a bit of a moon Uranus challenge. So I'm an Aquarius rising. And let's see if I can replicate it here. But I had a bad night. A very bad night. Um, at about, what was it, like 3 in the morning, I woke up feeling not so great. And what was happening at about 3 in the morning? The moon was applying to Uranus. And Uranus is a planet of disruptions, sudden things, interruptions. The moon is a planet of the body, the physical experience. This is happening in my personal fourth house of home, private life, in my home. So at about 3 or 4 in the morning, I woke up not feeling so hot. And, you know, if this is TMI for y'all, I don't care because I come from medical lands. So no medical thing is TMI for me personally. I'm having a UTI and it happens sometimes. And I woke up and I was like, I'm definitely having a UTI and I could not sleep. And so I thought, wow, I am going to call upon the powers of pharmaceuticals to help me through this. And I grabbed my phenazopyridine for those of you who are into it. Also known as Azo is the brand name, also known as urinary pain relief. Not a friend of the show. Not an affiliate of whatever generic this is. Oh my gosh, it's even expired. It doesn't matter, it's fine. I love this shit, to be frank. I love it. If you ask me what would I bring to a desert island in terms of over-the-counter products, I would say Sudafed, uh, this stuff, phenazopyridine, and probably some Tylenol for fevers. And I'm allergic to ibuprofen, otherwise I would say that. So now that you know my whole medical history, it's not. Phenazopyridine, I took it on an empty stomach, which you don't do, actually. And I didn't really understand that, which is embarrassing because I'm a pharmacist. But this is what happens sometimes is we learn because of ourselves and our own mistakes. like I've talked to plenty of patients about phenazopyridine, and now I'm questioning and thinking back to like the decade that I did pharmacy. Like, was I not telling people to take it with a snack? Because you got to take it with a snack. I don't remember. It was so long ago. I've actually been out in the wild for almost 4 years, which is crazy. But in the past, I've never taken this in the middle of the night. Never done that before. This was a new thing. I've always taken it during the day when I'm nibbling, eating stuff. And so it's never come up that I've taken this on an empty stomach, but I did. And also, usually I only take one, but I took two because I was nuts. And it made me so sick. It made me so sick. I was up all night. I didn't sleep at all. And it's funny because I took it because I couldn't sleep. And then it definitely made sure that I didn't sleep. Now, no hard feelings. I will still take this to a desert island. This is great stuff. Because it gets rid of the pain of your urinary tract infection. However, man, was that disruptive. I was throwing up, my friends, and that's what my moon Uranus transit was this morning. And this is a great segue into lunar revolutions because I don't usually follow lunar revolutions. I like them. It's nothing against them. I love them. I think they're helpful. I think they say stuff. It's just like such a luxury that I never do for myself because I'm too busy. I need to like make the time to divine for myself. But I looked at my lunar revolution for this month and it's like a health shit show. And I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. It will be like I have things going on this month, like several things health-wise that I'm attending to, and this was just a random thing. So, all to say, bodies, disruptions in my personal private life that now I'm telling you about. So it's not private anymore. But thank you to all my clients this morning who had to reschedule with me because I had 3 brain cells and I could not do astrology at that time. I had to sleep all day. So here I am. Um, that's your pharmaceutical tidbit. Take the azo, the phenazopyridine. You got to take it with a snack or food. The same thing happened to me with elderberry supplement years ago. It wasn't this bad. This was worse, but I remember I was on the way to work at a pharmacy, and I was taking my elderberry supplement for my immune health and support. And I took that on an empty stomach once, and I never did that again. I think I was like dry heaving in the back of the pharmacy like all morning. Take stuff with food sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes you gotta. Okay, pharmacist talk over, Moon, Uranus talk over. Let's look at some lunar return stuff. Ah, little hello, everyone. Yeah, Mercury's back. Mercury is in my sign of Capricorn. I'm so excited. It's where my natal Mercury is. I usually, if you knew me in real life, like this is the most I talk in my real life. I don't talk that much, actually. I'm not the talker. This is where that comes out. And a lot of that has to do, I think, with my Mercury and Capricorn. That is like, I don't need the story, I just need the facts, which is a problem if anyone's ever had a mom. All right. So supplement of choice would be ferrous sulfate. Yeah, if you had to go to a desert island, what is your OTC supplement, your over-the-counter product of choice? Um, yeah, Sudafed. Not that fake shit either. The real stuff. Uh, yeah, and Monistat. That also a good one. We're gonna need a bag. Yeah. Yeah, zinc too. Zinc totally on an empty stomach. It feels bad. Oh, I'm glad I'm not the only one. So just so you know, the people who are supposed to be experts at this stuff, you know, it's we learn too. We have to learn things too. All right. So what's a lunar revolution? Lunar return chart. I think the one that most people are more familiar with if you're starting to get into astrology in any kind of serious way is the solar revolution, the solar return chart, which is the chart of your birthday. It's the weather, the space weather on your birthday. So let me just use myself as an example because I'm gonna be real. One of my greatest weaknesses in this field of astrology is celebrity chart examples. Oh man, my least favorite kind of book to read is a biography. I hate reading I love talking to real people that I are in front of me. I love talking to people about their life. But if you make me read a biography, it's going to take me 5 years. So that part of astrology, which like my teacher Chris is really good at, I suck at it. So I'm just going to use myself because that's easier. So sorry if people don't like that, but I'm doing it. Um, Okay, there's me. Now I'm going to show you a solar return chart just to give you a comparison. So once a year, the sun gets back to the same place it was when someone was born. And whatever, oh, let's change the city. Whatever the chart is on that day at that time when the sun returns to his place, that will say something about your year ahead. And you can use that as a predictive tool for the entire year ahead from birthday to birthday. So similar concept, but you can also do it with the moon. And I'm actually gonna, and you can do this every 28-ish days. And this will tell you something about the month. So here's mine. Here's my lunar return that just happened on the 5th. And this is just another layer. So this is layered on top of the birth chart, on top of the solar return chart. It's just another layer of information, but now really looking at a specific month. The way that I interpret a lunar return chart is very similar to a solar return chart. I'm looking for a lot of the same things, which I will discuss here momentarily. Um, but yeah, here we go. So the one I'm in now, one of the first things I like to look at is where is the ascendant? And where is that ascendant in relation to my own birth chart? So here it's telling me that there's a bit of a focus from January 5th to whenever the next one is, about a month, that I'm going to be focused on my career and my life path and my public life and my forward-facing whatevers. And I know that one way this is coming up is in terms of social media and my public presentation. And do I want to go over to Blue Sky or not? Do I really want to do another social media shift because all of these billionaires suck? I don't know, but I'm going to be deciding that. So that's one way that we can look at it. Uh, I do like to kind of flip it and reverse it. And we can also look at it in terms of just that, the lunar return chart, and then look at where the ruler of that chart is. So here we've got Scorpio rising. So Mars is the chart ruler. How are they doing? Just okay. They're visible, but they're retrograde. They are in Leo, which is, they don't have a ton of dignity there. It's better than Cancer, I would say. So I'll say middling, not great. Mars is also in charge of sixth house matters in this lunar return chart. And so I would also expect that maybe this month for me is going to be really focused on health and labor. And if I had pets, I don't, but pets could be a thing too. And maybe it's going to be a little retrograde-y. Maybe it's going to be, you know, a bit inflammatory in a way that's not constructive. So yeah, maybe there's going to be disruptions to my partnerships. So at least a couple people have had to deal with that today. So we can start to paint a picture of what I might be dealing with. Um, Maybe this tells me that this month I'm really going to want to rest or have fun or, you know, recuperate. Maybe. So those are some of the main things I'm looking for is where is the ascendant of the lunar return chart, and how is the ruler of that doing? Now, I could also say they're getting some help from Jupiter. So it's like when I'm collaborating with other people, Jupiter is helping with goodwill, with reconciliation, et cetera, et cetera. Um, so not all bad, but definitely that's coming up. And I guess the last thing I'll say, being I'm putting it all out there, I'm also getting a brand new shiny IUD this month, and it is happening in a different way than it has ever been done before. I've had these before. I've never had pain management. So this time I'm actually getting pain management. So I am looking forward to it being a better experience than I have ever had before, which is going to be very different, very retrograde, very different. Returning, revisiting to something ouchy, painful, sharp and pointy, having to do with health. It's all fitting. So we can see how, yeah, it's lunar return chart, but it really works. It really is descriptive of whatever's going on. And I've looked at them maybe a dozen times in the past. So I don't have a ton of experience. I'm sure someone who uses them more regularly is going to have more to say. But those are kind of the main things. And of course, and just like a solar return chart, if you want to keep going with it, other things you can look at, where are the angles falling in the birth chart? Um, so like something about my career this month might be really involved with collaboration in the eighth, or I might be extra, having death on my mind and working toward estate management and planning with my parents or something like that. You can look at what planets are really close to stuff. So like I could see Mercury's by my natal. Oh, maybe this is why I'm talking about myself so much. I don't know. I usually do, but so yeah, you look at what's close to other stuff and then riff on that. Um, Lunar returns, they're really cool and useful, and they just give us more info. So I'm gonna look in the chat and see what's going on there. Thanks for listening to all my kind of personal stuff, but I don't know. I think it's good to talk about it. We don't talk about it enough. Which of my profected houses is handled by the moon this year? For me personally, uh, I mean, my second house and my moon is activated this year. I'm in the second house year. I don't know if that's what you mean, but yes, it's Saturn's on my moon. I can tell. Oh no, and there's so many different ways to phrase this stuff. Yeah, so Sam is saying they have a Mercury retrograde and they are feeling much more stuck now than they were during the retrograde. And that seems to be the case for a lot of folks that if you have a retrograde planet in your chart, you will more than likely, when that planet is retrograde in the sky in real time, you're probably going to do better than the rest of us because that's your usual phase that you were born under that maybe jives or clicks with you better than other phases of that planet. So very, very real there. That makes sense. At least you get your three times a year, your three magical times a year, maybe four. Yeah, thanks, Reverend Kai. We are incarnate in a body, and man, ugh, I need to speak with the manager about that. Who decided that? So let's go on to my next question, which is the lunar nodes. Let's talk about the lunar nodes and interpreting them in a birth chart. There's a few different ways, depending on the tradition of astrology that you're using. In the modern tradition, these are seen more as like mathematical points. They are not seen as planets or anything, versus in like the Vedic Jyotish tradition, they are seen as planets, as much more than just like a mathematical point. They're treated more as like a being almost, or actually. I hear a lot of talk, and this is not, there's no right or wrong answer here. So I'm not gonna, I mean, I've got my own proclivities of, Hellenistic astrology, but I don't know. I can see arguments for a lot of these ways of thinking about this, but the modern way of thinking about the North Node as like your ultimate purpose or someplace where you're going. or you're supposed to go, or there's so many ways to phrase it that there's something about the North Node that it's just like you're supposed to go there and do something special with whatever that is and what it's around. And that it can become like this, I don't know, fulfilling, meaningful. I just hear the word purpose used a lot. And then the South Node is seen more modernly, as far as I understand it, as maybe what we came in being really good at, like a past life, future life, or what you might be more comfortable with, thinking about it more as past or holding your older stories. Um, so, if we look at it that way, and if we look at it Hellenistically, the South Node being decrease, the North Node being increase, it does set up a bit of a directionality, kind of pulling one toward the North Node. Uh, to say Hellenistically, that's about, for the most part, that's how they were talking about these points. The South Node was a point of decrease, lessening, disappearance, even if temporarily. The North Node, a point of increase. Although they did not talk about the North Node like it was a good thing. In fact, Hellenistic astrologers, especially Valens, like goes on and on about how you don't do anything important when the moon is with the North Node. So it was seen as more of an unstable kind of energy that was not helpful, that tended to corrupt things that it was around. Even going as far to say, and I don't know if this was Valens, I don't know who said this, but one of the older astrologers said that not only is the sign where the North Node is corrupt, but the ruler of that sign is corrupt. And it's like, come on, that's like, I feel like we're, geez. Because in this case, then it would be like Mars would also be corrupt as the ruler of the North Node. Um, so yeah, they're pretty extreme about not liking it. It's not a good thing. So that's a big difference between how modern astrologers treat the nodes versus how Hellenistic astrologers treated the nodes. My favorite way and the way that I resonate with the most is the Jyotish Vedic astrology perspective, having the story about the dragon who wanted this immortal elixir, and the gods were like, no, you can't have it. The dragon did not care. They got some of the elixir anyway, and they became immortal. And just as that was happening, dragon's head gets chopped off, and then it's this disembodied, insatiable head of a dragon and this detached tail and back of the dragon. And so this two-part creature that materially the North Node is seen, so Rahu, the head of the dragon, is seen as more materially focused, more materially driven, interested in material world things. Material world, I mean, that can be things that you're holding in your hands, that can be riches and wealth. It can also be material world achievement. I have my North Node in Pisces. I tend to want more and more and more knowledge, even if I shouldn't. So it can be that insatiability with the North Node with Rahu. More, 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 more. I always say om nom 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 nom. And that can start to affect whatever planets are around it as well, especially if they're really close by orb. So noting this sense of like confusion with the dragon, this sense of frenziedness and chaos that ensued with this whole story, that is really descriptive of the North Node, Rahu, and it really fits what the Hellenistic astrologers thought as well in terms of this not being a stable point. The South Node was seen in the Vedic tradition, as far as I understand it, as a more immaterially focused, a more spiritually focused point. Opposite of that material focus of Rahu, Ketu is more of a spiritual focus. There's a decreasing, a lessening, a disappearing quality of this. And I have seen, by transit, the South Node move through a place. So like I've actually seen it move through the third, and someone's sibling went away to college. And so the sibling that they had been talking to all the time, living in the same house, now had disappeared a bit. It didn't mean they disappeared forever. But yeah, there was a lessening in that year and a half that the South Node was in that person's third house. So that's one example of that lessening, decrease, the word disappearance. It sounds kind of intense and dramatic, but it can be some of those more expected things too. So those are the main ways. So I guess just to summarize again, Hellenistic astrologers increase, decrease, less, more. North Node, watch out. Um, Vedic Jyotish, the tradition, they talk about the dragon, also that kind of increasing more, very chaotic, frenzied, confusing, something you gotta kind of deal with, lest ye be consumed by the dragon. And the South Node being that more immaterial, spiritual, kind of lessening component, and then more modern traditions looking at this as like kind of a past life, future life discussion sometimes, moving toward what you might be more comfortable with to what you might need to do some elbow grease to figure out, but then it becomes like your highest purpose or something. I don't know. You can hear my skepticism in there. I'm letting leak through. I have my moon on the North Node, as I have said to many people who have heard me say that. So sorry if you hear me always talking about it, but it's that annoying. It's very drive, very driven. It can push someone to heights of whatever in the material world. That's great, but at what cost? At what cost to ride the dragon and not be eaten by it? So in a birth chart, what do I do with this? So I'm placing all of these qualities onto some house topics, probably whole sign house topics, if I'm using places topically. I'm also going to be looking at any planets nearby, if there's especially any planets within 3 degrees. So even now, Rahu is going to be moving over Neptune and Saturn and Venus, and all these planets are going to be meeting the North Node, Rahu, and they're going to be growing. You know, Rahu's going to be expanding and growing whatever these archetypes are of these planets and making them bigger, unwieldy, confusing, more. So we'll get a real good view of that. But yeah, look at in the birth chart. Are there any planets by degree, by bodily conjunction near the node, south node or north node? I personally do not do too much in terms of like connecting the nodes. Sometimes I'll do it if it's really tight or it feels right or something, but I won't like usually connect in the nodes with aspects, like non-bodily aspects. Um, what else? Yeah, and I guess more practically speaking, so how I kind of coach or consult people on this is what do you do with it? So for instance, let's say we've got this Leo rising, hypothetical Leo rising, and maybe natally they have the North Node in Aries and the South Node in Ketu in the third house in Libra. And what I would say to this person is, you know, after talking with them about the third house, talking with them about the ninth, seeing how it's been coming out for them, you know, my advice is usually it's not that you shouldn't do the South Node. It's not that you don't do the South Node or the third house in this case or Libra. It's not that you just, you know, let decorum fly to the wind and just say whatever you want in like an Aries way. You're going to do some of the South Node stuff. And I like to pull in a little bit from the modern folks and say, maybe this is something you're familiar with. Maybe it's something that comes more naturally. That can be a nice, stable leaping off point or jumping off point to support you as you deal with whatever the heck the North Node is doing. Because there's going to be enough bandwidth, we need enough bandwidth to be able to sort through any confusion, difficulty, challenge that Rahu is doing. And we can't do that if we are focusing on an entirely different area of life. So then there's this need to kind of balance out the two buckets of house topics that the nodes go across. And there's probably going to be stronger themes as well in that life of that person between those two areas of life. So for this person, there might be strong themes of education, learning, travel, communication, all of that might be a really a fruitful place of growth. We'll just put it that way. So I hope that helps. You can look also at the ruler of these things, the ruler of the North Node, the ruler of the South Node. After all, you know, in this hypothetical case, Rahu is in the charge of Mars. Mars is supposed to be in charge of whatever's going on in Aries here. And so Mars should be handling that dragon. And so then we can ask, well, how is Mars handling the dragon? Um, yeah, I'll leave it there. I think there's more you can do with the nodes, but that's basically how I handle them. Hopefully that helps. Obscuring point says easy. Yeah, that's great. And that actually echoes something that I've heard Austin Coppock say, especially with like the sun by the north node or sun by the south node, is the difficulty with being seen correctly or perceived correctly or accurately because of the obscuring effect. And I think that's part of, maybe my umbrella. That should be a word that I use underneath the umbrella of like confusion, um, frenziedness, chaos, just kind of mess. I think of Marie Kondo from that, whatever, when she was in her cleaning phase, being like, I love mess. I feel like that's Rahu. Rahu loves mess. But yeah, obscuration as well, just as one celestial body is covered by the other and they get eclipsed. There's eclipsing, there's an obscuration that occurs. So likewise, when the nodes are by a planet, it might be obscuring themes of that planet. Oh, that makes me think of one last thing that I have noticed is, and I think this is also an Austin Coppockism. I think that's where I heard it first. The nodes representing places where boundaries or edges are blurred a bit. And I've noticed that especially with the North Node, blurring of edges, blurring of boundaries. One time it was, and this is not natal, this is by transit, but it was last May or June. Gosh, Mars was in Aries. And a couple things happened there. But it was this Mars, Rahu, and in Aries, and it was in my third house of nearby spaces. And it was so funny because I was camping and there was a bunch of people. It was like a big group of people that were all camping in the woods. And they got there and like it was a 5 day kind of thing. And a few days in, um, everyone's really settled into this little tent neighborhood. And all of a sudden, and it was, yeah, I'll have to look exactly when it was, but Mars was like within 3 degrees of Rahu. Some people came and just like plopped some more tents in between, in betwixt all these other ones to the point where like tents were just like right up next to each other like this. And I just laughed because I was like, oh yeah, it's the blurring of the tent stakes, like that's exactly what's going on here. So the blurring of boundaries as well. And and I give kind of that's a mundane example where, there's no harm being done. Unfortunately, there are many examples as well where those blurred boundaries or edges can actually be really harmful. So it's something to watch for, not to be paranoid about, but to just watch for. And if you notice it happening, yeah. So I have it in my second house, and I have noticed things with money, gifts, resourcing. I got to be real careful about like everyone over communicating and having expectations extra understood because there has been weirdness. It's another good keyword, weirdness. So those are the notes. I think they're good to look at. I like looking at them. So thank you for that point about obscuring. Let's see here. So there's one question. Is there any way to remedy the confusion of the nodes? Yeah, like, working on it, working on those things. So like if it's an Aries North node, what is it to have too much Aries? Too fast, too impulsive. Sometimes reactivity and fast, and sometimes like if you're an emergency medical technician, that's an excellent quality to have. So it's not that those things are bad, but what happens when it gets to be too much? Let's say, what is it when there's too much of Taurus? Or let's say it's a planetary combination and it's like Mars and the North Node. What does it have too much Mars to where it's hard to hold? And then think about what would be helpful for that. So for Mars, if there's too much Mars, I'm not going to add more martial things to my life. I'm not going to be drinking whiskey because booze is a martial thing. I'm probably gonna not eat as many spicy foods. I'll probably eat more yogurt or oats or something, something more like lunar or Saturnian. So there's ways to kind of do the opposite or to not add on more Mars when there's already too much. So that's how I remedy those things. So let's say it's flipped and there's too much Libra. Like let's say these were flipped around and it was North Node or Rahu in Libra. What does too much Libra look like? It's self-censorship. It's too much people pleasing or something like that. So then what you're not going to do is just whatever encourages that kind of too much Venus, too much, keeping the peace when there needs to be some healthy conflict or confrontation. So in that case, eating spicy food. Maybe that would be it. And this is where I go from my tiny narrow lane of I am super baby with remediation. And if anyone came to me to need remediation, I would probably refer them out to a Vedic astrologer, honestly, like Nate Craddock or one of the people that Austin Coppock recommends, because he's into that lineage. So, but it's not me. I'm not an expert, but those are the basics as far as like how to remedy some of these things or remediate. Let's see. Yeah, and I mean, if part of the challenge that you are seeing is like blurred lines, confusion, misunderstandings, just doing your best. All we can do is our best. It's a team effort, and being our best in terms of trying to be honest, clear as possible, communicating as best we can, and that's all you can do. Someone's saying, hello, tapestry of intrigue. Ooh, I am intrigued. Many professional astrologers prefer whole sign houses over systems like Placidus. As someone born far from the equator, this significantly impacts my chart. What are your thoughts on house systems? Oh, great question. Because yeah, like the further north or south you get extreme away from the equator, the more these houses get squished. So let's look. So I've got whole sign here. But let's use something like Placidus and then let's pretend that we are in, say, I don't know, Barrow, Alaska. Like, what's going on? This is the most northerly point in the United States. Um, yeah, like it doesn't make any sense. It's so extreme. Oh, it's porphyry. Whatever, it's fine. It's the same. Can I'll change. Oh, why does that say porphyry? Weird. Apply. Placidio Titi. Okay, yeah. And I did have a philosophical thought once that like the way that these houses get so squished in some of these quadrant-based systems, um, I mean, they are extreme places to exist and very remarkable places to exist. So maybe in that way it makes sense. But in terms of like astrologically speaking, for me, like I don't even this like breaks my brain. It doesn't help that I don't really read in quadrant terms that often. But here's my thought on it. It's a both and. It's a more than one. I love Dr. Jen Zart. She says it's the open house system where you're just open to whatever house you need for the technique. Because the truth is that a lot of different house systems were used for particular techniques. Um, so a quick history on house systems. So part of this comes from the Egyptian traditions where they had the 36 decans, these different 10-degree chunks of the sky that they were looking at. What astrologers have always been interested in is what is rising and what is setting at any given moment, what's culminating at the top of the sky. Oh my gosh, hold on, everyone. I gotta change my city. All right. So since time immemorial, everyone's been looking at what is rising in the relative east. What is culminating at the top of the sky-ish, where the meridian and the ecliptic intersect? What is setting in the relative west and what is anti-culminating in the subterraneous point underneath our feet? So Hellenistic tradition, we start to see whole sign houses be used. So this is like second, first century BCE, we see astrologers talking about writing in their texts, referring to the places, the houses, interchangeably with signs. And so that's one way that we know that they were using whole sign houses back then. But they also sometimes would calculate the exact ascendant degree. They wouldn't get just the sign that was rising. They would specify the degree. And then they would start to specify the midheaven in order to find out specific information. And then we also start to see in the Hellenistic tradition, so very early, similarly like the turn of the millennia, we see them talking about equal houses and porphyry, what we now know as porphyry houses, but actually it came along before porphyry. Valence talks about them. So we see astrologers using both whole sign houses and quadrants where you break up the four quadrants based on the exact degrees of where the angles are. And then you trisect, you chop up these intermediate areas. So they were doing that way back when, both of them. Now, the ways that they were used though, so whole sign houses, and this is how I operate, I use them topically to assign topics. So for instance, if I'm looking at who controls the fifth house, I'm going to look at Mars because Mars rules this fifth house of Scorpio. So if I'm looking at fifth house topics, I can look at Mars and Cancer in the first for more information. If I'm looking at fifth house topics, I can say that they are going to be scorpionic in nature, et cetera, et cetera. So assigning topics to places and houses and things. That's what we do there. The quadrant system comes in really handy when we're assigning, we're actually finding a midheaven. So you can do quadrant houses, but what's more is that these angles, they were used to define partially the strength of a planet. So then using it dynamically, using these angles in a sense to see how busy, active, advantageous is a planet that's next to it. Is that planet on the more angular side of of that degree? Or is the planet, like in this example, Saturn and Venus are falling away from the midheaven, so they're losing dynamic strength. Whereas the moon here in the 11th is gaining in dynamic strength because they're still moving up toward the midheaven. So you can use different house systems, but for me personally, I'm using whole sign houses to assign topics. I'm using quadrant houses to look at planetary strength. And also, when you do get, so that's kind of the base, but when you get later in the Hellenistic tradition, like with Rhetorius, you start to see that they're kind of using quadrant houses also to assign topics. And then by the medieval Renaissance, like that's just normal, and they've started to forget all about whole sign houses. And P.S., I am literally giving you the spark notes for chapter 11 of Chris Brennan's Hellenistic Astrology, the study of fate and fortune. That is like all up in there. I was actually just reading it. It's very serendipitous you ask. So yeah, it's up to you. Use what works best, use what feels best. The answer is both and. A lot of, if you're say doing following the work of like Firmicus, and Firmicus is using equal houses, then use equal houses. If you're following Valens, use whole sign. Unless you're doing the length of life technique, then porphyry or whatever. Yeah, there's no right or wrong answer. And then I will put below some of my favorite links to videos to help dig into that question even further so that you can make decisions. Hopefully that helps. Hello, Dux Noctis. Nice to see you again. Oh, Esther. Okay. So let's circle back. We're going to circle back. Example of planets by the North Node. So somebody has a Capricorn moon that is conjunct Rahu. So I'm not going to try to replicate it here. I'll just draw it. But if we got this loopy-doo person, So, okay, I would think, what is Capricorn moon like? So think about all the ways in which you are Capricorn moony. And then what does it look like when that's amplified, when that gets distorted or twisted? So one of the tropes is, not packing snacks, not taking care of yourself when you need that soft squishiness, taking breaks. A Capricorn moon will sometimes just power through, I'll deal with it later. I'll get snacks later. I'll feel my feelings later. And, it is what it is. That's how they operate sometimes. The question always is, what's your quality of life? Are you healthy, happy? Now think about, when could that get distorted? When does it go from, when do you cross that line from being, able to be resilient and strong when strength is needed? But when does that tip over into something that's like not good for your quality of life? I think that's kind of the main question there, is with Rahu, is it distorting something? Or is, if the moon is in Capricorn and it's already kind of struggling at some points, to get the external support that it needs, maybe other people aren't supporting you as well, as that can be a thing. Then what does that look like when that's amplified? It could be like really not feeling a lot of support, or even getting a lot of support, just to validate if that's been a challenge. Because I know we've talked, but yeah, that's it. I would watch for that. But then, if Rahu is just this really strong material world drive, for better or for worse, some ancient astrologers, I mean, I shouldn't say like all of the Hellenistic ones thought it was a bad thing, especially by the time you get later into the tradition and then into like medieval Renaissance. I think they start to treat the North Node more positively. But if that's just a bunch of resilient drive, then I mean, use the heck out of it if you want, as long as it's not, if your quality of life isn't suffering. So that's how I would start to handle that. But yeah, first getting a really good handle on how that moon is presenting and when that gets a little funky for you. So hopefully that helps. Thank you for the questions, everyone. Really good questions. Let's see here. I think that's probably good. I feel like that's probably good. Yeah, it's been almost an hour. And I probably need a nighttime nap, a disco nap, as we call it in the industry. Any final questions? Last call? Anything you wish we would have gone over that we didn't? See if I missed anything. All right, looks like everyone's just dandy. Thank you everyone for your time and your energy and your questions and comments. If you have any afterwards, if you're catching this later, you can definitely put a comment below. If you have any questions you want me to cover for the next month, let me know. You can also DM me on Instagram for those things. That's usually where I do my call of questions. Yeah, I have a newsletter. There's a lot of social media shifting happening. Again, I think this is just going to be the nature of social media for a long time to come. But I do have a one-stop shop that is always my website, www.aligninglightastrology.com, and also my newsletter, which is sign up on my website. And you get once a month. It's just a one-time email every month with everything in there, discounts, horoscopes, links to whatever I'm doing, links to past stuff, if I have anything clever to say. It's all up in there, so you can sign up for that, and that will be independent of any billionaire saying weird stuff that we don't like. So, yeah, I think that's it. Take care of yourselves. Uh, and until next time, I guess I planned my next forecast? I did. So on the 29th of January, it's Wednesday the 29th at 12 p.m. Central Time, I'm going to be doing my forecast for February. So you can find me here at YouTube live for that forecast, or catch it later. Again, that's Wednesday the 29th at noon Central Time. Yeah, everyone have a good night. Take care.